Hello, my Aloha tribe, and welcome to the Aloha Perspective, where you get a little bit of something and a whole lot of everything. Happy Thursday. It is Thursday. It's the end of our week. And I have a story for you today. I saw it on Facebook, and I wanted to share it because I've been seeing a lot of empowering stories on women and people in general, not just women, but people in general. But sometimes like some of the women's stories I'm going to share going down the road are going to be stories about, how they were almost silenced, but they empowered themselves. And I want it to be something that's empowering for men, women, and again, however you identify. So, just because these are stories of people who felt pushed down and said, I'm fighting back. So this one, this isn't even a fight back story. This is just a human interest story, really, a human interest piece. And I want to wait for a few seconds for people to come on before I start reading it. But I saw this on a Mighty Girl. That's I can't even think. It's a site on Facebook. How about that? It's a site on Facebook. And, so it's a site on Facebook. I follow, it's one of the pages. That's it. It's one of the pages I follow. But, this is a great story. So I'm going to read it from the thing because I thought, you know what? Why bother writing it down when I can just shrink the screen and read it from there in the words that the person wrote it in. So, just as a lead-in, good morning, Muddy. On May 14th, 1961, in Anniston, Alabama, a 12-year-old girl defied hate and reminded people trapped on a burning bus what compassion and kindness look like. This is the story of Janie Forsyth McKinney. And so, yeah, that's what I wrote. But, again, this happened in Anniston, Alabama. And we know in the 60s, Alabama wasn't exactly known for its compassion and kindness towards anybody that was non-white. So, I know, racism sucks. It does. KKK sucks. And, you can take that to the bank because I'll say it to your face. But, I don't understand. And they hide behind a cross. That's what's even freakier, is the fact that they think this is what Jesus would want. It's like, hello? And not all of them do. Some of them now just take it to a whole new level of just ick. But anyways, so from a Mighty Girl, a page on Facebook. After a bus full of freedom riders was firebombed by white supremacists in front of her house in Anniston, Alabama, 12-year-old Janie Forsyth McKinney defied a hate-filled mob to perform a heroic act of compassion. At the time, civil rights activists were conducting freedom rides throughout the southern United States, during which groups of blacks and whites would ride interstate buses together in violation of local segregation laws. The Freedom Riders, who were predominantly college students, were met with hostility and violence in many locations, including famously in Anniston, where on May 14th, 1961, a mob attacked the bus and lit it on fire with the Freedom Riders trapped inside. The mob forced the bus to stop right outside of McKinney's home. She witnessed smoke billowing out the burning bus, and after an exploding fuel tank forced the crowd back, she watched the riders pour out and get beaten by the mob. In an interview with UCLA Today, she recalled that they were so sick by then that they were crawling and puking and rasping for water. They could hardly talk. Horrified by the scene before her, the seventh grader ran into her house for a bucket of water and cups and pushed through the violent crowd to reach the bloodied riders laying on the ground. She first went up to an elderly black woman who reminded her of her nanny, Pearl. She recalled, I started with her. I took her a glass of water. I washed her face. I held her. I gave her water to drink. And as soon as I thought that she was going to be okay, I got up and picked out somebody else. McKinney knew that her actions would anger the local KKK, but she explained that she was driven by one of her favorite passages of scripture. Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do it to me. The police let the violence continue for 15 to 20 minutes. McKinney recalled until they finally dispersed the crowd by firing warning shots into the air. After ambulances took the riders to a local hospital, officials announced It was closed and left them in the waiting room. What the fuck? It took a black minister from Birmingham to form a convoy to come and pick them up and take them back to Birmingham, she explained. Although the violence was over, the repercussions for McKinney for her courageous act had just begun. She learned later that the local KKK discussed whether to try her as an adult for undermining them. Ultimately, the Klan decided that she was a mentally deficient child and took no action. But life was never the same for her after that day. McKinney reflected how it was such a black mark on my family that nobody, not even my father, would talk about it. I was the black sheep. I got ostracized in school by some hardcore Klan kids. For years, McKinney believed that her father in particular had never forgiven her for her actions that day. After her father passed away and Pearl was on her deathbed, McKinney asked her if this was the case and finally learned the truth. Pearl told her, "No, child, that's not right. He told me he had never been prouder of you than he was on that day." So too, McKinney remains proud of her decision to act on that fateful May Day many years ago. All I know is that if I had made any other choice, I would have had to live with that. I'm proud of the choice I made. I think it was a moral choice, a humane choice, a spiritual choice. I wouldn't undo it for anything. One of the things I love about that is, I believe everything happens for a reason. And I believe that bus happened to just, have to stop right there. Because I think maybe in some miraculous divine intervention, there was a child there that they knew would help. She put aside any doubts in her mind, any future repercussions. Nothing mattered to her except for helping these people who were literally just sick, like on their knees sick in front of her home. And that isn't just compassion. That's basic human instinct. You see, we all know this. You're not born to hate. You're raised to hate. You're raised to, not see other people as your equals. You're raised to look down on other people from your high horse. You're not born that way. It's taught behavior. And what really kind of strikes me is that she sits here and says she later learned that the local KKK discussed whether to try her as an adult for undermining them. That goes to show you, that line alone, that this Klan reached the highest of, government positions in this town. And I don't understand it. I was never raised to hate. I was never raised to look down on somebody else. I was never raised to see somebody who was different. And good morning, older sibling. Good morning, Cuz Lorene. And so, the story just astounds me. And, not in a bad way. I think what this girl did, and for a 12-year-old, was beyond. It was an amazing act by a child, basically just a child. And again, she said she was highly ostracized by some of the Klan kids later. And, I often wonder about these kids nowadays, right? I often wonder what... Thanks, guys. I often wonder what some of them think now. Are they still hateful? That was 64 years ago. So, no. Yeah. Wait, 1961. Oh, wait. Yeah, that was 64 years ago. What is wrong with my brain? But I often wonder that, right? What goes through their mind? Now, when they look back on this, are they still hateful? Or are they a little more, did they maybe have some kind of comeuppance in their life where, they became a little kinder, found a little more compassion, maybe in some respects found God, and because I say it like this, found God, because again, some of these people were like, they went to church, but then they hid under white sheets and hoods. I mean, what the hell? If you're that brave and you want to firebomb people, show your damn face. Okay? Don't hide behind shit. Why? Because you're afraid someone will get mad at you? Seriously? You're already doing bad things. Okay? And if you go to church, you may think that God's okay with this, but he is not. And you will get it when you die. All right? I'm here to tell you this. Because that's literally attempted murder. Literally attempted murder. When you firebomb a bus filled with black and white people. That is attempted murder. And if anyone would have died that day, and same with the hospital, what the hell? There is an oath, do no harm. Do no harm is the oath they take. There's a Hippocratic oath that you're supposed to care for people no matter what, and they closed the damn hospital? That's some karma. That's some karma coming your way. Sammy says, I remember reading an article probably 30 years ago that was about the Klan. There was a picture included of a little girl, maybe about 5 years old, dressed in a Klan outfit. I remember thinking it was the saddest picture I ever saw. Literally. And if that article was just 30 years ago, guys, that's the 90s. Okay? 1995 was 30 years ago. But it's sad. It's sad. Why so much hate? Why? Exactly. Even my cousin said it, the Hippocratic Oath that they swear by, do no harm, and they shut the hospital down. And yet, on the flip side, you had a black minister coming from Birmingham and taking the white and the black people, or I should say the black and the white people, to go get help. To go get help. And to anybody who was ever a freedom rider, no matter what color you are, kudos to you. You are like saints and angels in my book. Because they knew. They knew the dangers that faced them. I'm sure their families and their parents knew the dangers that faced them. But they did it anyway. This little girl who was 12 years old in 1961, she did it anyway. And for years and years, she felt like the black sheep of her family. She felt like her father just kind of, side-eyed her in a way all the time. And it turns out he was so proud of her. But probably because of where they lived, he had to keep that to himself. He couldn't tell her this. So it doesn't just damage the person, it damages the family. Because that's their name. But I love that she just did this. This sounds like something an older sibling would do back in those days. I mean, all of you guys, but some of the stories that I've heard from her is just, and I'm grateful to be surrounded by people that I know would always do the right thing. I really am. I'm grateful to know that I'm surrounded by people who would do the right thing. Because we're not facing such dissimilar things now in this country. And we need to be better. We need to show compassion. We need to show kindness. If we are going to sit there and say, thanks be to God, we need to be examples of God's love. We need to be examples of the earth's love, of nature's love. Wherever you turn your turn your faith to, whatever higher power you turn your faith to, we need to show examples. We don't need to add to it. We need to be the example. We need to show people that it's okay to be kind to other people, to be compassionate. I think about that kid that Sammy was just talking about, in the Klan outfit, about 5 years old. This kid's an adult now with her own kids. Is she still the same way? Does she still feel hate in her heart while going to church every Sunday and saying, thanks be to God? It astounds me, the hypocrisy that happens in the world, period. Not just there, but in the world, period. And amongst everybody, amongst everything. Older sibling. Yeah, older sibling grew up during segregation and busing. Well, Sammy grew up in the South, like straight up the South. I'd be curious. I'd love to sit down and talk to you about some of that, because you guys are pretty close in age. So, but yeah, I wanted to share this story because it was a very empowering story. And for her to know, even though it was after her father died, for her to know that her father was so proud of her on that day, even though he was never able to say it to her, but for her to be able to hold her head higher after that, just knowing that he was so proud of her, that brings me joy, because for the majority of her life, she had always thought she disappointed him. And to know in her lifetime that, that she hadn't, it brings me joy. So let's see. She was 12 years old in 1961, so she was probably born in 1949, which means she's about 76 now. So, and she carries this story with her, and I don't think she picked up that pail and those cups, because she wanted to be acknowledged later down the road. I think it's a story that people remembered and told other people, and someone says, we got to find this girl. We got to find this person because this person saved these people. And I think it's a beautiful thing. She showed compassion. She showed strength, and she showed some serious courage there, especially living in hardcore clan country. And I think we can take these examples and be these people, show the world that what kindness and compassion is. So these are some of the stories I want to share, and they're not just going to be like this where we talk about things like in this subject matter. It's going to be across the board. There's one about the first woman to run the Boston Marathon. There's another one that changed the face really of marathon running, whose story I found within the other story when I Googled her to look it up. The Queen. I have one on the Queen about how, she joined the military. I mean, it was towards the end of the war, but, she was also still very young when the war started. But, and then there's another one about the woman who invented paper bags, or the machine to create paper bags. Just all these great stories. There's one of my favorite ones that I read was a story about a young woman who she was a slave, but God, she was like a genius. And this is back in the 1700s, and people were like, no, I guess one of the reasons I want to share these stories is because, I hate to use the word the patriarchy, because there's so many good men in this world. There really are. I mean, I have a girl dad. My dad is a total girl dad. He'll see this stuff. Like sometimes we'll watch TV and like, why would anyone do that to a girl? Why do they think they're not capable? It's just like, welcome to my world where some men just think you're stupid. I remember one time, a sibling and I found a little old man at the corner of the Target that we used to live nearby, and his car wouldn't start. So he was waiting, and we asked him, do you need help? And he's all, you can't help me, you're girls, or something like that. And we're like, and it was so funny because older sibling was so polite, and she's like, okay, blah, blah, blah. All right, well, if you need anything, we'll be right in the parking lot. And she knew I was ready to explode at that. She rolled up my window and locked the window. I'm like, why won't my window go down? And she's all like, because she's all like, he's having a bad enough day. But I was mad. And that was like the third time that week we'd seen somebody, I mean, we're not magical people. We were just raised right. We see someone who's in trouble, we go push the car to the side of the road. End of story. And that's not the first time we've ever done. That was the first time we were ever denied. That was the only time we were ever denied. It's like, seriously, old man? I wanted to say that. It's like, seriously, old man? Let's see you push the car. We have more energy than you got. Oh, I was so mad. I was so mad because I think I grew up in an era where we've been taught as women to be limitless, you know, and it keeps getting better and better and better. I mean, yeah, I faced some opposition in the male direction, but again, I had a very strong mother, and I had a very strong father, in the sense of, you know, teaching me that I can be whatever I want to be, whoever I want to be. And for someone to sit there and say, well, you're a girl, it's like, huh, all right. So anyways, funny story though, when we were done, there were finally two men that were helping him. And I just, at this point, older sibling did not see it coming, because I was driving now, because she was hurting a little bit. So I'm like, I'll drive home. I rolled down the window and I said, yeah, we could have done that too. I rolled my window back up and she's like, Shelly Marie. And it's like, I know, nobody ever uses my full name unless I'm in trouble, or unless I have my British friends like to call me Shelly Marie. I know, it sounds so good though. I love it. Anyways, we're off target. So I'm going to finish with this story. This is one of my favorite stories of an act of kindness. An act of kindness that was shown kind of at a rude behavior, but not intentional rude behavior. And it was a 5-year-old girl, about 5 years old, little blonde girl, blue eyes, and thirsty as hell. All right. And she was in the South with her parents, who were touring with, you know, they were musicians touring. And I'm sure by then she could read, because this is a smart girl. But she didn't care. She just like, I'm thirsty, I'm running to the fountains. Didn't care what fountain she ran to. She ran right to the segregated, they were segregated fountains, right? But she ran right to the colored fountain. The colored fountain. God, I hate that. The colored fountain. And her mom comes up behind her. She cut off a black woman. And she says, you know, and I don't know what was running through this black woman's mind, but I think it was a little bit of, uh-oh, this is not going to end well for me. And it was actually the little girl that got scolded and was told to apologize to the lady for cutting her off. You know, and that was Laura. That was Laura. Laura didn't care. Laura wasn't raised to be that way. Laura's parents traveled with everybody. They were jazz musicians. So, you know, every color was on that bus. And when they traveled, but I told her, she's like, oh, it was no big deal, you know, but I told her, I said, look at it through the eyes of the woman. She's probably thinking, oh God, this is not going to end well for me, especially if someone else sees it, blah, blah, blah. And here comes her mother charging after her, you know, and I know Mom Barbara, she probably had that look on her face like, really? Like, we did not raise you to be like that rude. And for her to apologize to the woman, to receive an apology from the mother and the child in a place where the children probably treated her like crap. I told her, I said, I think that probably stayed with her. I think that gave her hope for this world. A small but huge act of compassion and kindness shown by a child who at that age, when you think about it, like Sammy said, the 5-year-old dressed in the Klan gear, who at 5 years old already knew to treat people kindly, but was still being a kid and just beelining. And that is one of my favorite stories of older siblings, because, and even her mom told me that story. She's all, you know, because she didn't realize that she'd told me, but I was like, yeah, can you guys tell me some stories from the road and stuff like that? And, but it's one of my favorites because, like I said, you know, in a world that she lived in filled with so much hate, there was hope in a tiny little blonde child whose grandmother called her the angel of goodness. So I'm putting that out there now. So now you all know that older sibling was deemed by her grandmother to be the angel of goodness. I've heard other stories of this kid. There were some horns hidden under those halos, under that halo. I love you, older sibling. But anyways, I think that's a good place to leave off. So, yeah, we'll, like I said, I want to read some of these empowering stories. It won't just be about women, just empowering stories, period, you know, across the board. It just happens to be that a lot of them I've read lately have been on women. But I really wanted to share this one first because this was such a wonderful, wonderful story that I don't want this story to ever die. I want this story to have a life of its own forever and ever, even after, Janie Forsyth McKinney is long gone and just a note in history. I want people to remember her name, because that act as a 12-year-old was the purest act of compassion and kindness. And that also is a testament to the way she was raised. She, even though her father said nothing that day, she was raised to be kind to people, and she followed she followed the scripture, right? What was it that it said on there? That she said, whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do it to me. I believe those were Jesus's words. I think. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty positive those were Jesus's words. Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do it to me. And she remembered that. That is what Christianity is. That is what a God-loving person does. And I am sure that when she meets her maker one day down the road, he will be like, you know what? Come to the front of the line, walk right in. Walk right in. No waiting. No waiting for Janie. This is the Janie Forsyth McKinney line. No waiting. Like a fast pass right into heaven. So, anyways, and I think a lot of people have that. I know, again, I'm surrounded by good people, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And I'm grateful for all the things that, they have probably had to see and endure in their lives. And I do pray for the people who are misguided. I'm not saying that the other side of me doesn't whap them with karma, but that's not for me. That's not for me to judge, right? Judge not, lest ye be judged. Yeah, there's a lot you can judge about me. Not perfect. But I think we all try our hardest. And I think that's all we are really asked to do is, we're going to fall apart sometimes. We're human. But I think if we try to do our best to just lead with compassion and kindness and love, I really do think we can add that into this world. So I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so, so much for watching. I will put this article in the comments. I have shared it to my page actually, but I'll see if I can figure out how to put this article into my comments. I'm not sure if I can, but just remember, just in case, it is the page is A Mighty Girl, MIGHTY girl. So it's a really good site. I love this page. I love reading the stories on there. But I do love that my Facebook feed is being filled more and more with all these really empowering stories. And they bring me joy. So again, have a great day, everybody. I'll see you back here Monday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, Facebook Live. All lives are public under Shelly Marie Lucas. You can also find me across the social media board. It all starts on YouTube. So if you end up on YouTube through one of my other accounts, please click like and subscribe if you like. And yeah, I will see you on Monday. Have a wonderful and safe weekend.